is gonna be so much fun. So much fun. Don't you just love it? I do. I love it. Okay, so we're here to expose the Arabs, aka biblical name Ishmael, aka hood version, modern day time language, Arabs. Okay, now I learned from my Caucasian friend that when he went wherever he went, because you know they get around, he went to the UAE, and in the UAE, I'm gonna say allegedly, rumor has it, or it goes by the laws of their nature and land, that these people, men specifically, wipe their behinds after they use the bathroom with their right hand. That's why you're not supposed to shake a hand with an Arab or anybody from the UAE, because they wipe with that hand, and they use a bidet to wash their arse after they use the bathroom. Also, history has it that these men use their wives for reproduction uses only, and they date men for fun and other, things. So they just use the women for reproduction, and men they do other things with, have fun with, and everything else. Kicking it, johnning and lubing. You know what I'm saying? Wink, wink. So that's how Arabs get down in the UAE. I also have a video about that they only use their women for reproduction to create more jihad, but whatever. This video, though, is about the transatlantic slave trade. Because I love videos about transatlantic slave trade, because I feel like we was all there. Okay? We were there. Just in different bodies. But I, for one, really feel a deep connection to the slave trade, because I, for one, feel like my ass was a slave. And I probably was always trying to run somewhere, get away, and was shot. But that's neither here nor there. Reincarnation is real. Just can't let it go. I just can't let it go. We're going to talk about what the Arabs did, though, and how they got down. Because we always talk about, what the white man did during that transatlantic slave trade and how brutal Esau was with us. But we never really go into the other nations that put us on that, because the Africans put us on the boat. They sold us off to these other nations. You feel me? So we never really go into how these other nations treated our asses once they got us into their claws and grips. aka also known, etc., the Arabs. Then we're going to go into how the Spaniards took us into slavery and how brutal they were. But right now, you really need to watch about how Ishmael, aka the Arabs, did the black slaves, aka Hebrew Israelites. So let's go.
Commemorated as the day Britain officially abolished its slave trade in 1807. But how many recall that Arab slavers were the first and last in modern times to ship millions of Africans out of the continent as slaves? The Arab history of anti-black racism predates European anti-black racism by several centuries. The early Islamic Empire exhibited all the characteristics of anti-black racism, and blacks suffered the lowest form of bondage. Europeans took photographs of chained black African slaves in Arab slave trading vessels on the east coast of Africa in the 1880s. Slavery persisted openly in Saudi Arabia and other Muslim countries in the latter half of the 20th century, 100 years after slavery was abolished in the United States. As late as the 1960s, African Muslims still sold slaves when they arrived on pilgrimages, as a way to finance their pilgrimages. Arab nations lagged far behind the rest of the world in abolishing slavery.
Hey, how do you get so many games?
Commercial.
Use AI. I just asked. AI.
I just want y'all to also notice, did you notice how some of the slaves had feathers in their hair? As if they were Native Americans?
Oh, I was just showing Kevin.
Just wanted to point that out.
Thanks, Allen Iverson.
That all of us are the same, but not the same. We're different tribes within one. We got the tribe of Gad. We have the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, Levi. So yes.
Saudi Arabia and Yemen in 1962. United Arab Emirates in 1963. Oman in 1970. However, unlike the rest of the Arab nations, hereditary racial slavery persists in Mauritania, despite multiple official attempts to abolish it. In 1981, by presidential decree, Mauritania became the last country in the world to abolish slavery, but no criminal laws were passed to enforce the ban. Under international pressure in 2007, the Mauritanian government passed a law allowing slaveholders to be persecuted. However, that law has rarely been enforced. Far more anti-slavery human rights activists have been prosecuted than the handful of Mauritanian white masters. In addition, slavers are offered compensation for freeing the enslaved, while the victims of the brutality are offered nothing. In 2015, under international and some domestic mobilization pressure, the Mauritanian government created 3 special courts to prosecute slavery, but so far they have only tried very few cases. However, that's just not all about this oddly unique sect of slavers. The Arab slavers, at some point in history driven outrageously by their odd ambition for economic power and human control, had their African male captives subjected to unimaginable suffering and exploitation. Castration. Yes, you heard correctly. Now, it is of utmost importance to note that what you are about to hear might seem like comparing which, between two evils, is better. It does not detract from the fact that the trade in human beings was unspeakably hideous. In the Americas, slaves were allowed to marry, though their children could be sold off like puppies right before their eyes. But what happened to the blacks enslaved by the Arabs? Arabs castrated African slaves. Thus, they could not reproduce their kinds to multiply and replenish the earth. Welcome to yet another video segment. In this video, we are taking a dive at one of the darkest chapters in the human history, marked by its profound brutality and stomach-twisting inhumanity, the Arab slave trade and the castration of their male captives during this dark era. Before we get right into this head-spinning narrative, don't forget to like this video as a way of acknowledging our efforts, share with family and friends to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and subscribe to keep the channel growing. Your support means a lot to us. The castration of male captives during the Arab slave trade would be a forever-lasting, devastating experience for the individuals who were subjected to this depraved, inhuman practice and their families. In his book, Slaves and Slavery, published in 1998, the British writer Duncan Clark defines slavery as the reduction of fellow human beings to the legal status of chattels, allowing them to be bought and sold as goods. This, in essence, is what both the Arabs and Europeans did to Africans, to justify the shipping of millions of Africans as slaves to faraway lands in Asia, in particular the Middle East, and the Americas. The African slave trade, surely one of the most tragic and disturbing episodes in the history of mankind, Clark uncovers in his book, had its origins in the intervention of forces from the civilizations that developed in the regions of the Mediterranean Sea, today's Europe and the Middle East, into the arena of the more fragmented civilizations of sub-Saharan Africa. Africa became a source of slaves for the cultures of the Mediterranean world many centuries before the discovery of the Americas, but it was that discovery and the resulting shift in focus towards the Atlantic that prompted the culminating explosive growth in slavery with such tragic effect. Slavery was, in fact, a central feature of life in the Mediterranean world, especially in Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, Greece, Imperial Rome, and the Islamic societies of the Middle East and North Africa. The most important source of slaves in medieval Europe, Clark's research shows, was the coast of Bosnia on the eastern shores of the Adriatic Sea.
Okay, pause. They had us in Bosnia? Bosnia. You know how far Bosnia is? Oh my God. Let's go.
The word slave and its cognate
Slav.
in most modern European languages is itself derived from Sclavis's meaning Slav, the ethnic name for the inhabitants of this region.
Oh my
For
God.
various reasons, including the harshness of the terrain and endemic warfare among local clans, Bosnia proved the most convenient and long-lasting of these slave-supplying regions. Whichever clan gained a temporary upper hand was always willing to sell its captured rivals in exchange for the goods of the Mediterranean world in the markets of the ancient Romanized city of Ragusa, that is, present-day Dubrovnik. From there, Slavs were shipped as slaves by Venetian merchants to supply new markets in the Islamic world. Thus, for the Islamic world, Clark further reveals, Slavs provided the major source of slaves in the 250 or so years between the defeat at the Battle of Poitiers in AD 732 that forced the consolidation of their dramatic conquests across North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, cutting back the flow of war captives, and the expansion of the import of black Africans across the Sahara from around AD 1000. The number of people enslaved by Muslims has been a hotly debated topic, especially when the millions of Africans forced from their homelands are considered. With full control of a great part of Africa, the Arabs began to capture young boys and girls and took them to Egypt, where they were sold into slavery within Africa, or taken across the Indian Ocean to Indonesia, China, Southwest Asia, and India. By the 10th century, the demand for slaves from Africa to work as plantation hands, sex slaves, domestic maids, and slave warriors had increased greatly, so much so that an estimated number of 5,000 slaves were shipped out of Africa a year. The historian Paul Lovejoy estimates that some 9.85 million Africans were shipped out as slaves to Arabia, and in small numbers to the Indian subcontinent. Lovejoy breaks his figures down as follows. Between AD 650 and 1600, an average of 5,000 Africans were shipped out per annum by the Arabs. This makes a rough total of 7.25 million.
Hold on.
Then between 1600 and 1800, another 1.4 million Africans were shipped.
Do you hear these numbers? Do you hear these numbers? We're talking millions of people. That is an entire continent of people, of Hebrew slaves, of us. That is a whole nation of people. 7.25 million, 18.5, 20 million slaves, black slaves. Because, you know, you got to throw Ham in there, too. You got to throw some Africans in there, too. Because they took a lot of Africans. They did. But the majority of them was Hebrews. Wowzers. Because you got to remember, it's 12. We the 12 tribes of Israel, so we deep. So that's a lot of tribes within. You know what I'm saying? That's a lot of people. You got Gad in there. You got Ephraim in there. You got Naphtali in there. You got Reuben in there. You got everybody in there. Everybody getting chopped up, divided, sent over here, sent over there. Remember that video I dropped about how Esau was a busy bee? Transporting, going back to Africa, going from here, going to continent, going from China, Australia, London, Greenland, Canada, Jamaica, everywhere on the earth. Your ass was shipped around. Russia, they just said we was in Bosnia. The hell? Man. Millions of us. So when people be like, oh, I wasn't a slave, my answer is, what, a slave? The hell they was. Every last one of us was on a slave ship. Your grandma's, mama's, daddy was a slave, going on through generations. If they even made it across through any half of this shit, even if a lot of bloodlines was cut short through this shit. That's a lot of black people that ain't even here. Their bloodline ain't even here. Because remember, they got cut short. We about to go into how they said Negroes was neutered to stop the bloodlines and families from growing through the Arab slave trade. They wanted to cut your bloodline off. They just wanted your ass. Okay.
Out by the Arabs. The 19th century represented the highest point of the Arabian trade, as 12,000 Africans were vehemently shipped out per annum. The total figure for the 19th century alone was 1.2 million slaves to Arabia. Some other historians estimate altogether that between AD 650 and 1900, 10 million to 20 million people were enslaved by Arab slave
Oh my
traders.
God.
Others believe that over 20 million enslaved Africans alone had been delivered through the trans-Saharan route alone to the Islamic world. Dr. John Alambella Azuma estimates in his 2001 book, The Legacy of Arab Islam in Africa, that over 80 million...
That's a lot of people. That's everybody that we know. That's a lot of people, bro. That's everybody. That's all of us. That's our entire nation. That's all of us, bro. I'm done. That's all of us.
My job.
More black people died over that route. The Arab slave trade was so intense, bloody, merciless to say the least. The cruelty on African captives by the Arabs was beyond telling.
Look at black Native
Similar
Americans.
to the transatlantic slave trade, captured slaves were beaten to be weakened and chained together. However, captured victims in the sub-Saharan slave trade had to endure several weeks of walking through the desert, carrying loads for their new masters from West or East Africa, to where they were eventually sold in the slave markets. Cairo, Baghdad, Istanbul, Mecca, and other centers. These slaves played various roles in the economy of the Muslim world. They were used as servants, harem keepers, laborers in fields, mines, and hydraulic yards, and as cannon fodder in armies. In several of his detailed book about the slave trade, British explorer Henry Hamilton Johnston explains how several slaves died in the desert, while others who fell sick or were badly bruised and could not make it were brutally killed by their masters. David Livingstone, the British missionary, traveler, and explorer, was so upset by the way the Arabs treated their African slaves that he wrote back home in the year 1870. These were his words. In less than I take to talk about it, these unfortunate creatures, 84 of them, wended their way into the village where we were. Some of them, the eldest, were women from 20 to 22 years of age, and there were youths from 18 to 19 years. But the large majority was made up of boys and girls from 7 years to 14 or 15 years of age. A more terrible scene than these men, women, and children I do not think I ever came across. To say that they were emaciated would not give you an idea of what human beings can undergo under certain circumstances. Each of them had his neck in a large forked stick weighing from 30 to 40 pounds and 5 or 6 feet long, cut with a fork at the end of it where the branches of a tree spread out. The women were tethered with bark thongs, which are of all things the most cruel to be tied with. Of course, the bark thongs are soft and supple when first stripped off the trees, but a few hours in the sun would make them about as hard as the iron round packing cases. The little children were fastened by thongs to their mothers. As we passed along the path through which these slaves had traveled, I was shown a spot in the bushes where a poor woman the day before, unable to keep up with the march and most likely to hinder it, was cut down by the axe of one of these slave drivers. We went on further and were shown a place where a child lay. It had been recently born and its mother was unable to carry it from debility and exhaustion. So the slave trader had taken this little infant by its feet and dashed its brains out against one of the trees and thrown it in there.
Pause. Pause for the cause. In the Bible, and I do recall, happy are they who get to dash their little ones into pieces against the clefts of the rock? Happy are they. That's gonna be us. You didn't took a baby and did that? You think ain't no retribution for that? For that mother, for that woman, for these people, for these men? These men? You done did this to the head. You done dealt treacherously with the head. And the seeds and the women. And you think ain't nothing to be done for about that. You don't think you got to pay? Ishmael got to pay too. The Arabs got to pay too, boo-boo. They ain't off the hook. Ain't nobody off the hook. They got to pay too. Let's keep going. Wow.
This was the brutality meted out to the Africans by the Arabs. Looking at all this in a very factly honest manner, the totality of the unthinkable, horrid practices besetted upon a certain group of people. Historians agree that it is a mistake to equate the bare survival of Africa with cultural or social or economic stagnation. For the slave trade visited such panoply of tragically interconnected disasters into the lives of every African for centuries, so that they have worked their way into the very racial memory of the continent and its people, particularly females, that only with time and kindness can it be expunged from the psyche of Africa. The Arabs' treatment of black Africans can aptly be termed an African genocide. Arabs killed more Africans in transit, especially when crossing the Sahara Desert, than Europeans and Americans combined, and over more centuries, both before and after the years of the Atlantic slave trade. Arab Muslims began extracting millions of black African slaves centuries before Christian nations did. Arab slave traders removed slaves from Africa for about 13 centuries, compared to the 3 centuries of the Atlantic slave trade. African slaves transported by Arabs across the Sahara Desert died more often than slaves making the middle passage to the New World by ship.
You want to know why? You want to know why? Because the whites had to keep your ass alive to get their product there to get it done. They'll let you mass produce because they had a game plan. They like, man, they about to build us a whole new world. We gonna use these people to fund and do everything. So we gotta keep them halfway alive, and we gotta let them reproduce and think, you know, it's a little sweet, you know, like a carrot on a stick. So the white man a little bit more like, I want to say like snake, like sneaky or smart with it though. Like, yeah, we got to keep their ass alive though. Yeah, we hate them and we got to do all this, but we got to keep them alive, and they got to reproduce because we need more of them. The more they reproduce, that's more money. That's more work. That's more slaves. That's duh. But the Arab like, fuck that. Let's kill these things. We don't want to produce them. We just want to use them for what we got to do and throw them to the wayside. Gutter butt, ride them till the wheels fall off. And we don't want them mass producing because we don't want them uprising. We want to kill their testosterone. We don't want to have no family. We don't want them having no social structure. We don't want none of that. We just want to use them what the fuck they for and throw them in the trash. That's what the Arab like. Woo. This hard to watch, y'all. This hard to watch. I'm going to do it though.
5 years if they worked in the Ottoman Empire's Sahara salt mines. Black Africans.
For your most brilliant
This is a commercial for me. I can't. This is some shit.
Did not enjoy immunity to many of the diseases found in the Arab world, which also resulted in high death rates. In West Africa, the Arab slave trade encompassed a vast region from the Niger Valley to the Gulf of Guinea. This traffic followed the trans-Saharan roads. The crossing could last up to 3 months with a high mortality rate due to the dire conditions of the trip. Here is the testimony of the German explorer Gustav Nachtigall. The poor children of the black country seemed to meet death here, at the last stage of a long, hopeless, and painful journey. The long journey accomplished with insufficient food and scarce water, the contrast between the rich natural resources and the humid atmosphere of their homeland, and the dry and anemic air of the desert, the fatigue and the privations imposed by their masters and by the circumstances in which they find themselves. All this has gradually ruined their young strength. The memory of their homeland that has disappeared along the way, their fear of an unknown future, the endless journey under the blows, hunger, thirst, and deadly exhaustion have paralyzed their last faculties of resistance. If the poor creatures lack strength to get up and walk again, they are simply abandoned, and their minds slowly fade under the destructive effect of the rays of the sun, hunger, and thirst. According to the work of some historians, the Arab slave trade has affected more than 17 million people. In the Saharan region alone, more than 9 million African captives were deported and 2 million died on the roads. This despicable phenomenon was legitimized by Islam, as Christianity would later condone the transatlantic slave trade. For example, the Tunisian Arab historian Ibn Khaldun, from 1332 to 1406, wrote that the only peoples to accept slavery are the Negroes because of their lower degree of humanity, their place being closer to the animal stage. Another one, the Algerian Arab theologian Ahmed al-Wancharisi, from 1430/1431 to 1508, offered legal and religious recommendations. This, he said, I have been asked about slaves from the land of Abyssinia who profess monotheism and accept the rules of the holy law. Is it legal or not to buy and sell them? If their conversion to Islam comes after the establishment of a property right on these slaves, then Islam does not demand liberation because slavery was caused by unbelief. The state of servitude persists after the disappearance of unbelief because of its existence in the past. The
That's
Arab
interesting.
slave trade was characterized by appalling violence, rape, and worst of all, castration of black male slaves. While African women and girls were targeted, captured, and deported by Arab slavers for use as sex slaves, the male captives were, on the other hand, pitilessly castrated to prevent them from reproducing and becoming a stock. Castration of male slaves became a habit among slave traders due to the fact that they were in higher demand, stronger, noted to work faster and more efficiently, and were not a threat to slave masters and owners who feared that their wives, concubines, and female slaves would have affairs with them. The suffering inflicted on the victims of castration was profound, encompassing physical and psychological trauma. Castration was done to boys between the ages of 9 and 12, as it was believed that they survived the process more than an adult or adolescent. Although very many did not survive the process, as they often died during or after the harrowing operation. Whites died more, so slavers concentrated more on blacks. This was the darkest chapter in history that highlights the extent to which humans were dehumanized and exploited for gain. Here's a more detailed insight into this practice. 1. Economic factors. One of the primary reasons for castrating male captives was economic. The exporting countries had good economic incentives to castrate male slaves before they were shipped off. In the medieval slaving industry that was designed for exporting Slavic prisoners of war to the Arab world, castrating the slaves was an integral part of the process. Castration was then performed in the famous castration houses in Venice. Eunuchs, or castrated male slaves, were highly sought after due to their perceived trustworthiness and reliability. Eunuchs were considered valuable commodities in Arab societies, thus fetching much higher prices in slave markets compared to non-castrated slaves. Their lack of reproductive capability meant that they could serve in positions of trust and authority without posing a threat to the owner's hereditary wealth and power.
Pause.
Eunuchs were often employed in...
Them people look like the Bushmen in Australia. I just want to say that. They really do.
sensitive positions such as harem guards, administrative posts, and as servants in elite households. They served in influential positions in the Abbasid Caliphate's administration, with some even rising to the rank of vizier. The economic incentives gained by slave traders from exporting black eunuchs to the Arab nations encouraged the practice of castration. In some cases, such as the Zines Rebellion in the 9th century Iraq, castrated slaves were sought after to work in dangerous and demanding environments like salt mines. This practice had persisted for centuries in the Arab slave trade. As late as 1903, there were still 194 African eunuchs in service to the Ottoman ruling family. 2. Control and domination. Castration was employed by Arab slavers as a means of exerting control and dominance over their male captives. By removing their ability to procreate, the slavers aimed to eliminate any potential threats of rebellion or the establishment of rival lineages. Additionally, castration was intended to ensure that these slaves would remain solely devoted to their master's demands without the distractions of family or personal attachments. 3. Social dislocation. Enslaved males who were castrated were forcibly removed from their communities and families. This social dislocation had far-reaching consequences as it disrupted the social fabric of African societies and led to imbalanced gender ratios. In regions where castration was prevalent, such as East Africa and the Sudan, entire villages were affected as young men were captured and subjected to this brutal practice. Many eunuchs who served in the harem of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul remained in servitude for life, isolated from their African roots. Their roles as loyal servants or guards sometimes meant they were isolated from their own cultural backgrounds and communities for life. Young boys were captured and castrated so that when they grew up, they could serve as eunuchs in harems. This slave ship was photographed in 1896. This large group of young boys may have been destined for castration to serve as eunuchs. The slaves in the photograph were headed to a Muslim country well after the American Civil War. In fact, slavery in the United States was a good bit more humane than slavery in the Arab world. It was bloody for Africans, bloody beyond words. In some cases, African societies would engage in castration as a preemptive measure to protect their youth from being captured and castrated by Arab slave traders. This reflects the deep fear and trauma associated with this traumatic experience, both physically and psychologically, for those subjected to it. The surgery itself was often performed without anesthesia under crude and unhygienic conditions, leading to excruciating pain and a high risk of infection. Many African boys did not survive their castration surgery. 6 out of every 10 people who were mutilated died from their wounds in castration centers. This is a prime reason why there are not many communities of blacks living in the non-African Muslim world today.
What you say? It's not a community of blacks living in the Muslim world, in the Muslim world today? Why is that? Why isn't it a whole bunch of Negroes living in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Istanbul, Pakistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, all the stands, Dubai? Why ain't y'all over there deep and heavy? Ask yourselves. I mean, I used to always look at that and be like, I wonder why there ain't a whole bunch of niggas over there. Because they was chopping off your rod, a.k.a. what's that thing called? They do the neutering you like a dog for centuries in the millions and the thousands. That's why it ain't no black people over there. So you go over there if you want to. Because I learned a long time ago that when you're still over there, you got one time to get something good because they chopping the hand off that you stole with. So if you got a Peter Weeder and you's a Negro, they was chopping that off. Because they ain't want no more of y'all mass producing. Or banging their wives and their women's and their sisters and stuff. That's why. Arabs don't mess with you for real. They don't. So don't mess with them. Because they like to chop and do other stuff. I mean, this is just eye-opening. Let's go.
Despite the millions of black African slaves who were sold into the Muslim world, castration led to hormonal imbalances on survivors, affecting the physical development and health of victims. Without testosterone, eunuchs often suffered from various health issues such as decreased muscle mass, fatigue, obesity.
So you don't got nothing. Once they take your rod, that's it. You dead out in the water.
Osteoporosis, and a lack of secondary sexual characteristics.
Wow.
5. Cultural and religious beliefs. Some societies believed that castrated individuals were spiritually pure and more suitable for certain religious duties.
Wow.
For instance, in some Islamic societies, eunuchs were considered more appropriate for guarding holy sites. The guardianship of the
There go that thing. There go that thing being built. There go it, the Kaaba. The holy Kaaba in the city of Mecca. That's that thing being erected and built. Now, where the black stone at that they got the rub on the side? In the cornerstone. They putting it in there. So they had you as a slave building a demonic temple so they could worship. That's that thing being built. And you a slave during this time. And they done chopped your thing off and had you over there guarding it and building they stuff. Wow. Wow, Arab, Ishmael. So let's get to it. That's it being built. And go look at it today. They marching around it, rubbing on it, on a space rock in a box. Let's go.
Use of African eunuchs. Some men were castrated to be eunuchs in domestic service, and the practice of neutering male slaves was not limited to only black males. The Khalifa in Baghdad at the beginning of the 10th century had 7,000 black eunuchs and 4,000 white eunuchs in his palace.
They did it to white people.
Ronald Siegel in his 2002 book, Islam's Black Slaves, The Other Black Diaspora. In the Arab world, demand for castrated slaves was so high that even with the appalling death rate from the procedure, it was still profitable, which explains why there is no large African diaspora community in Arab countries.
Yep.
Castrated men don't father children. The Arab slave trade had a tragic impact on the evolution of African societies. Some areas were completely devastated and depopulated. Welsh explorer Henry Morton Stanley, from 1841 to 1904, was a horrified witness of this traffic. He wrote that after the depredations of the Arab traffickers, the black blood flows toward the north. The equator smells corpses. As one commentator puts it, Could it be true that the corrosive effects of 4 centuries of commerce in humans, with its temptation, its inbuilt opportunism, its reduction of humans to a cash value, its cycles of revenge, and its inevitable physical brutality, have built lasting flaws into the African pattern of thought and action? The United Nations has made March 23 the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade, and UNESCO has made August 23 the International Day for the Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its abolition. When will there be an International Day to commemorate the victims of the Arab-Muslim slave trade?
Right.
When will an international research program address this subject? When will a project be implemented to identify, restore, and publicize the sites and monuments linked to this Arab trade, like the existing projects concerning the transatlantic trade? When will educational material be produced and cultural and artistic programs conducted to raise awareness of this criminal activity? When will a museum on the Arab-Muslim slave trade be established?
Yep.
This brings us to the end of this video segment.
Wanna know why they can't do it? Because they still getting money.
So, then don't forget to
and it's their dirty little secret.
Families and friends. And
it's everybody's. Just the world's dirty little secret that the world basically had you in chains and bondage throughout the centuries. Rome, the Roman Empire was all. This empire is the last one though. With this one before this one was Rome. It's a picture of all the empires that we have went into into slavery from biblical times till now. So at the end of the day, I just wanted y'all to know that the slave trade was multifaceted. Okay, it had many faces. It wasn't just white, but it ain't just black and white. It's tan too, and olive colored. Many colors to the slave trade, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody had their hands on God's chosen people, on his jewelry. That's why you're a Jew, because you jewelry. So everybody stole jewelry and was breaking it, crushing it, wearing it, and doing whatever they wanted to do with it. So retribution got to come from on high. You can't take what's happened to us into your own hands. Talking about, we gonna rebuild and we need to come together with a plan. Ain't no plan, ain't no rebuilding. This is the Lord's work right here. He's going to come back and restore and rebuild and set everything right. All wrongs gonna be righted. Only it's in the power of Yahweh Shem Shah to do that. There is no mere mortal can fix what the Lord set to do. You stupid if you think you can try to change history around right now and be like, oh, we're gonna rebuild. We can build a new Black Wall Street and we're gonna have you on the white man's land. You behind enemy lines, dog. You ain't know this Babylon. This ain't your fight. We just here to endure, get through it, keep the faith, hold on until the Messiah return. To blow this place sky high. So that's all I wanted to say, y'all. Have a blessed day. Don't never forget what happened, who the real enemies are, and who your real power is. Shalom.